More than 40 million votes have now been cast across the U.S. for the midterm election. This, according to data analysis conducted by the University of Florida's U.S. Elections Project. And with just 2 days until Election Day, the FBI is also issuing a warning. In a tweet today, the Bureau said intentionally deceiving people who are eligible to vote so they don't show up to the polls is a federal crime called voter suppression. They're urging people to be aware of these tactics, especially through private messaging, and they're asking people to report activity like this to the FBI. Joining us now is David Levine. He's an Elections Integrity Fellow for the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming on the show. Just this last Friday, Politico reported that cybersecurity experts from the National Guard will offer assistance in 14 states to ensure the midterms are safe from any cybersecurity threat. And Jen Easterly, the director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, recently said there's no specific threats to elections. So the question I have, what does the fact that they're bringing in the National Guard even say to you, and how worried should we be about these midterms?
Jay, thanks for having me on. You know, as Jen Easterly also previously noted, this may be perhaps the most complex threat environment we've had in the run-up to an election. But that's no reason not to be confident in the upcoming midterms. You know, Jen Easterly's agency, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, along with the FBI, put out an advisory last month noting, right, that malicious cyber activity aiming to compromise election infrastructure is unlikely to result in a large-scale disruption or prevent voting. That advisory also noted that there's no reporting to suggest that cyber activity has ever prevented a registered voter from casting a ballot, compromised the integrity of ballots, or even affected the accuracy of voter registration information. And finally, that advisory also noted the many safeguards that are in place to help ensure that everybody who wants to cast a ballot can do so successfully. And that includes having things such as backup paper poll books in the event that the poll book you check in on Election Day goes down, having provisional ballots in the event that a voting machine becomes inoperable, and a whole host of other checks and balances. So for me, as a former election official, you know, what the National Guard is doing is just part of that election mantra of planning for the worst, hoping for the best.
So given your expertise, I have to get your thoughts on one online platform that's been making some big changes, and that's Twitter since Elon Musk took over. He's cutting about half of its workforce. So how might that affect Twitter's ability to handle things like false information that are spread on the platform?
Sure. You know, that's a situation that I think is certainly worth monitoring closely. There were cuts that were made across the entire agency, including with regards to that portion of Twitter that was dealing with election integrity. But again, I think it's worth noting that there isn't anything to prevent folks from being able to successfully cast a ballot. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned by bad actors or bad faith actors that try and influence folks through online platforms like Twitter. But again, I think there are safeguards in place that will ensure that folks can successfully cast a ballot if they choose to do so.
So CISA also called the 2020 election the most secure election in American history. Still, we're hearing from many Republican candidates this year either questioning or outright denying those results despite a lack of evidence to back it up. So bottom line, this time around, how confident should we be that votes will be accurately recorded and the winners will be legitimate?
We should be very confident, Jay. For one, many of the folks, many of whom are my former colleagues, are election administrators across the political spectrum that are continuing to do what's necessary to ensure that the 2022 midterms will be done and administered properly. This is just a disconnect between the political reality and the technical reality. You know, since 2016, for example, we've seen that the number of jurisdictions that have paperless voting systems has gone from 22% all the way down to 5%. We've also seen a number of jurisdictions that have post-election audits in place to try and validate and make sure that if there are any issues with the voting technologies, we can go back to the paper ballots and make sure they're counted properly. So for me, you know, Yes, it is concerning that we hear much of the mis and disinformation that fueled efforts to overturn 2020 continue to be part of efforts with regards to the 2022 elections. But because of the advancements that we've made in terms of protecting our election infrastructure, and because of the folks that we have serving on the front lines administering our election, I feel confident, and so should voters, in the upcoming 2022 midterms.
David Levine, Elections Integrity Fellow for the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Jay, thanks again for having me.